Number 1. I've got a whole bunch of creepy stories. I was a really creepy kid. I spent a lot of time with my grandparents as a kid. It was a better option than daycare while my parents worked. This story is one of many that's passed around the table at family get-togethers from time to time. I was around 3 or so at the time. Downstairs in the rec room that was adjacent to the kitchen, my mother's side is Italian, of course, so they have 2 kitchens. I was supposed to be napping, but my grandmother heard me talking and decided to investigate. She found me staring at the window, and I said, "I don't want to go in the water." On another creepy note, this wasn't the only thing that wanted me to go in the water. But anyway, she asked me who I was talking to, and I replied, "There's a boy stuck in the hole in the window." Being a devout Roman Catholic and someone who is also sensitive to the paranormal, she called the priest from our church to come. He then blessed the house. Fast forward to just a few years later, and then I'm around 6 or 7 now, and I have really no memory of this incident. Time for a nap. I sleep on the couch in the same rec room. I have this insanely vivid dream where myself, my grandmother, and her sister are all sitting on the couch watching TV. Suddenly, with a fluid motion and silence, they stood up and turned the TV off. They walked towards the door and then shut the light off and closed the door. As soon as the door closes, a ghost emerges from the window and says, "I am the ghost in the window." And then it comes after me. I run screaming, and just as I grab the doorknob, I wake up. As a child, I was shaken by this, but I don't say anything because it was just a dream. Here's where things get pants-shittingly creepy. Every time I slept in that room, I had the same exact dream until I was around 14. It wasn't until later, at Christmas, when my family was discussing my creeptacular antics, and, as a child, it had dawned on me. My grandparents are very old now, 93 and 89. They don't use the basement much anymore because they can't really climb the stairs like they used to. So, going down there now to fetch something sends shivers down my spine. Number 2. As I previously posted, I was a creepy child. One of the creepiest stories that is passed down during family get-togethers is a story about Mary. I have very little memory of this. The memory I do have is of a house we rented when I was very, very young. We rented it off a nice man named Pat. He was left at the altar. It's a really sad story. He couldn't stand to live in the house, and I don't blame him. It was a beautiful house, though, professionally landscaped and everything. Being a really creepy child, when I would get home every day, I would run to the painting of a lily vase. I think it was a wedding gift my parents received, but I digress. I would tell this painting every aspect of my day, to every detail. My mother eventually got too freaked out and she took the painting down, to which I threw the biggest temper tantrum. Or, so it is told. She eventually caved and hung it back up. One night, while my father was on a fishing trip, just me and my mom in the house, she was reading in the living room by the lamp. I got up, walked through the pitch black of the house to retrieve a toy, which I never did until this day apparently, and came back into the room. I stomped my foot and said, really loudly in a 3-year-old voice, this house is bad." My mother almost had a meltdown when I said this. A few weeks later, my uncle moved in with us. My mother and I were watching TV, and it was time for me to go to bed. As she was trying to usher me to bed, I put my hand over the TV and said, "Big fire." She ignored me and hurried me off to bed. My uncle came home drunk that night and put chicken and french fries in the oven and then promptly passed out on the couch. Needless to say, the oven caught fire. My dad beat the shit out of his brother that night. The oven was destroyed, but the house was fine. A few days later, I put my hand over the car, and as my mother and I were going out, said, "Big accident." She flipped out, and we didn't go out. After all this, I began to mention to Mary. My grandfather first caught me talking about it, but I didn't think much of it. I'm not sure if it was before the boy in the window incident or after, but I would speak constantly of Mary. Mary this, Mary that. It almost became a meme for my family. One day, while my mother was visiting her aunt and her cousin, she casually asked me, "What's Mary doing?" I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "She's hanging from the neck and has a knife stuck in her throat and has blood dripping down." I was fucking 3 years old. I watched Sesame Street and the Flintstones and shit. This was a red flag for my mother, and things only got worse after this. She heard me talking about going in the water, and some things to this day she won't tell me. We eventually moved out of Pat's house and into another house. One night, I walked up to her and said with anger, "Aren't you going to say anything to her?" "To who?" she asked. "Mary." "You tell Mary to get the fuck out of my house and never come back," she said. After that, it stopped. I'm not sure what Mary was, a young girl or old or something else. Number 3. Okay, so here's another paranormal thing that happened last night. My husband is on the road. He's a truck driver. And usually I go with him. But I wasn't feeling well and decided to sit this trip out. Around 2 or something this morning, I called my husband to see how the trip was going. We chatted for about half an hour before he pulled over for the night to sleep. And shortly after, I went to sleep too. At about 3:40, I was awakened by something. The air felt heavy, like it was hard to breathe. I opened my eyes and instantly regretted it. I was facing away from the wall where my bed is, so I was sleeping on the outer side of the bed. I felt like something terrible was laying next to me, and I would literally be scared shitless if I turned around. My heart started beating terribly fast, and I could feel myself starting to hyperventilate. I remember I kept saying Oliver, which is my husband's name. It wouldn't be the first time he has surprised me and finished his trip early and come home and be there when I wake up. So I prayed and prayed that it was him. It wasn't. Whatever it was got up off the bed, and I could feel it moving out of the bed. I squeezed my eyes shut and prayed to God, Muhammad, Buddha, and every other god I could think of. That was whatever it was would leave my house. My being the idiot that we can all be sometimes, I popped open an eye to see what it was. I didn't see anything. I knew it was still there watching me because the air was still just so heavy and so thick. I sat up in my bed, and that's when I caught a glimpse of a dark shadow figure of a man. It was freakishly tall and thin, with super long arms, hunched over, and had a glowing red aura around him, and what looked like fire for eyes. The scariest thing I've ever seen. I'm a sensitive, which means I can see them, but I can sense them and pick up their emotions. I felt really pissed, like I was filled with hatred when I looked at whatever this thing was. I turned to the nightstand to flip on the light, and as soon as I did, the thing was gone. The air became soft again, and it was easy to breathe. My heart stopped racing, and I stopped hyperventilating. I don't know if it was a dream. It's possible, but it felt so real. I felt the thing in the bed, and then it moved out of the bed and looked at it. So, I have a friend who's a priest. I'm going to have him come bless the house. This is the second time something paranormal has happened in my home. Hey guys, thanks for listening. This is Scare Doctor here. Sorry for the lateness of the video. I've had some things I've had to deal with, and I've had a few family matters to deal with as well. I do want to give a big thank you for the people that allowed me to share their videos on here. The first two were by the same person, and then the third one was by somebody different. I will be posting links to all three stories down in the description. I'm hoping to have another video up by this weekend. That way I can try to get back on track with it. Just if you have any comments or suggestions, leave it down in the description below or in the comments below, and I will be making that video very shortly. Thanks again, guys.